I haven't filmed a monthly wrap-up in I don't know how long, because I'm never usually inspired to film them. Normally I film my vlogs and I think, you know what, I spoke about all of my thoughts and feelings on those books in the vlogs. I feel like I don't want to do a wrap-up. But something about this month has inspired me to want to do a wrap-up, and I don't know if it's because I feel like I had a good reading month, or I feel like I've got things to say about these books, because I don't necessarily know if I do, but I'm inspired to film a wrap-up. Maybe, I don't know, will it happen more often? I don't know. But we're here, and I'm going to film a wrap-up of everything that I read in January. I read a total of 7 books in January. I actually have like monthly stats and stuff now because of my planner that I've been filling in. I read 7 books for an average rating of 4 stars. My total pages read in January is 3,371, and my most read genre is fantasy, because all of the books that I read are fantasy, because I am a fantasy reader, funnily enough. 3 of the 7 books that I read this month were rereads. There is something in the air. I'm gonna say there's either something in the air or the moon is at play, because I never normally reread this much, but I have reread 3 books in January. The first book that I managed to finish this month is A Day of Fallen Night by Samantha Shannon. This book is big. She is chunky. Too chunky, possibly. I feel like this book took me forever to read. I have definitely been putting this one off for a long time. It was on my priority list for last year, and I actually started reading this at the end of last year, so it didn't go on my priority list for this year, just because I'd already made a little dent in it. And I'm very glad to have this one off my TBR, because I feel like it's kind of been haunting me. But this is the prequel novel to Priory of the Orange Tree by Samantha Shannon, but prequel by like quite a long while. I don't know if there's a like number of years that this is before, but it's like a number of generations before the events of Priory of the Orange Tree. And this again follows the Queendom of Innis and the dragons and the dragon riders across the sea. There's a number of characters in this one that you're following. We've got Glorian, Dumai, and Tunava, I believe were their character names. And I really enjoyed all of the different perspectives in this. Similar to how Priory was set, we've got these 3 different characters from 3 different areas in the world, and somehow the events of the novel bring those characters together and their lives do connect in a way. I will say my main thought on this is that it took far too long for it to feel like the plot was happening. It took, I would say, half of this book for me to then be like, oh okay, stuff's happening, we're getting somewhere now. Which on one hand I didn't enjoy so much, because it felt like it was dragging, it was going on for a long time, it took ages for me to get into the story. But on the other hand, all of that build-up is what makes the world feel so rich and makes the characters feel so real. The world building is fantastic, we're learning the politics of the land and how all of these different places either connect or don't. So it's kind of a swings and roundabouts as to whether that's a good thing or not. But overall, I gave this one a 4-star rating. I definitely didn't enjoy this one as much as Priory. I read Priory really quickly and loved Priory. This one I didn't love quite so much, but it still came out at a 4-star, and I'm very glad to have knocked it off my TBR. Next up, I reread one of my favourite books of all time. As I say, it was a month for rereads, but I reread The Discord of Gods. This was for my Patreon buddy read. It was actually my Patreon buddy read for December, but I read it in the beginning of January, just ahead of the live show. This is the 5th book in the Chorus of Dragon series, the final book in the Chorus of Dragon series by Jen Lyons, and I love it. I love it so much. This one, I feel like when I read it the first time round, I forgot so much about what this one was about, and rereading it was fantastic. I loved it so much, and I feel like so much more of it went in on reread. Obviously I cannot tell you what the final book in the series is about, because that would be a massive spoiler, But the first book is Ruin of Kings, and you've probably heard me talk about Ruin of Kings many, many times on this channel. It's one of my favourite series. I absolutely love it. It follows a young man called Kieran who is at the centre of a great number of prophecies, and we aren't sure if he's destined to save the world or destroy it. And how that prophecy plays out. Oh. You know how sometimes it's like, oh, are you destined to save the world or destroy it? And it's really predictable, like, what obviously is going to save the world is the main character. Like, the way this story goes, that's not the vibe. And I love it so much. I love all of the characters from this series. It's one of my absolute favourites. I won't ramble about it too long. Obviously, it got 5 stars from me. It's one of my favourites of all time. I love it. Next up is one that's got a bit more of a mixed reaction from me, and that is The Darkness Before Them by Matthew Ward. Now, I really wanted to love this book so much. I have read Legacy of Ash and Legacy of Steel by Matthew Ward. I still haven't read Legacy of Light. Yes, it's an ongoing joke. But I loved what I've read of the Legacy series so much, and I was so excited for a new series from Matthew Ward. I was excited to get a new world from him and just, fall into it. And I didn't get that with this. I personally think that the Legacy series, or what I read of it, is better than this, and I was a little bit let down. I enjoyed the beginning of it. Like, the beginning of it I had a good time with, and the very end of it I had a good time with, but it definitely lost me in the middle. It felt like whatever was happening in the middle wasn't necessarily, like, important to the plot. We weren't getting anywhere. It just felt a little bit irrelevant. I don't know. But the way that it ended definitely got me hooked, and for that reason I would probably pick up the sequel whenever it comes out. But this one follows a young woman called Kat who has fallen in the world. She used to be of, like, higher rank with the more noble families, but in this world debt is very important, and when you have debt you sink to the lower ranks. However, Kat has a very unique ability that she can control and communicate with spirits. And spirits in this world hold a lot of power. When a person dies, their spirit is collected, and that spirit is what powers and protects a lot of things in this world. So her having that ability to communicate with and control those spirits comes in handy for the life of a thief who's trying to claw her way out of that debt that she's in. Of course, when there's a thief story, there's usually a heist that goes terribly wrong, and that's where the rest of the plot picks up from. The beginning was good. The beginning was strong and it did hook me in. The ending was its strongest point, definitely lost me a bit in the middle. This one got a 3-star from me in the end. Next up is The Hunters by Jadeyraereads. This and this are quite similar in my mind in terms of I've read a couple of books from Jadeyraereads before that I've absolutely loved, so was excited to try something new from him in a different world, blah blah blah. Same as I was excited about the Matthew Ward one. Where Matthew Ward let me down with that one, Jadeyraereads did not. I thoroughly enjoyed The Hunters. The relationship that we have between our two main characters, Rhee and Giovanni, is just incredible. Rhee is a woman on the run and her past is catching up to her, but what is she on the run from? And how does the young girl that she has with her fit into that story? What is Giovanni's history? What is her past? How do they connect? What are they running from? And why are there now a number of hunters after them? And what does it mean for their relationship as well? I really enjoyed this. I like Jadeyraereads' writing style. It's quite comedic. I found it quite funny in places, despite the fact that the relationship is a bit of a heavy topic. But I loved that development and how complicated their relationship was. I had a very good time with this. Of course, love the world, love the writing, but the star of the show is definitely the relationship development in this one between guardian and child, let's say. I enjoyed this one a lot, and this one came out at a 4-star for me. Good time. I do recommend Jadeyraereads. Next up is one I was a little bit apprehensive about, but also very excited about, and that is Fae Bound by Sarah Alarifi. This is the beautiful Fairy Loot edition. Oh, I had heard people loving this, but I had also heard it be called a fantasy romance. I'm not a big romance reader, so it being called a fantasy romance made me think that the romance was going to be a bit too heavy and not necessarily for me. In the first half, I didn't feel that. The first half felt very strong to me. We were learning about the world, the history, the people. So we've got elves, we've got fairies, we've got mythical humans, but there's a war between the elves, and our main character disobeys orders and is banished and stumbles upon the Fae Lands. And everyone knows that the Fae Lands is where everyone falls in love, right? So the journey to like get to the Fae Lands and discover the Fae Lands was very much up my street. I enjoyed the politics of it, I enjoyed the war element of it. Then the latter half definitely fell more into the romance, and I didn't enjoy the second half quite so much. But I was still very pleasantly surprised by overall how much I enjoyed this, and it did actually come out at a 4-star for me, which I am surprised at. It was a lower 4, but it still came out at a 4-star, and I still had a good time. Our main character, whose name I have completely forgotten, Yiren, is banished, and her sister Lettel follows her into that banishment. So we also have the sisterly relationship of Yiren and Lettel and what they think of each other, and then both sisters have a bit of a romance plot going on in here as well. But yeah, I was pleasantly surprised. I think the thing that I found the most intriguing about this is definitely how the elves, the fairies, and the mythical humans all come together in one story. I really enjoyed that element of like the history of this world, and I think I could potentially continue this series, but obviously it's going to be a long while before the next one of this comes out, so we'll see how I feel at the time. But currently, pleasantly surprised by how I felt about this one. My camera battery is flashing, so I'm going to try and be quick here, because the next two are rereads, and I reread The Art of Prophecy. I've spoken about this one very recently. This was a 5-star read from last year, and I desperately want to read The Art of Destiny, which is the sequel, but I wanted to reread this before I get into The Art of Destiny, so I reread it. Still very much enjoy it. It's about a prophecy that goes horribly wrong. Our main character is the prophesized hero Jean. However, he has been silver spoon-fed his entire life and has absolutely no way of actually fulfilling this prophecy until our grumpy old mentor character comes in and takes over his training, but then the prophecy goes horribly wrong. He's prophesized to kill the king, someone else kills the king. What happens then, and how does the whole religion fall? I very much enjoyed my reread. I won't go on about it too long because I've definitely spoken about this recently. And then finally, my last read of January was Tracer's Blade by Sebastian de Castell. Another reread, 4 stars, shockingly. I gave this one 4 stars when I read it the first time. It's the series as a whole that's one of my favourites, but I love this. This was a very interesting experience because this edition is actually annotated by my friends. We've got a little key in the front, a picture of us all. So it was really interesting to reread it like with their thoughts in the margin. But as well as that, it was just so entertaining and so much fun to see them just making jokes of everything. Like they were making innuendos, that's what she said jokes, taking the piss out of each other in the comments, in the annotations, comments back and forth. It was just a really amazing reading experience. If you have a favourite book and a group of friends that maybe want to read it, get them to do a travelling book, annotate the shit out of it, and then reread it yourself, because this was a fantastic experience. But aside from that, this is my January Patreon buddy read. We're reading a book from this series each month, so Night Shadow in February. And Sebastian de Castell is one of my favourite authors. I speak about him a lot. I've spoken about this book probably numerous times on my channel. This is book 1 of The Greatcoats, which is the story of the disbanded Greatcoats. The king has been murdered, and his magistrates, the Greatcoats, have been disbanded. 3 of those stick together, and this is their mission to fulfill their dead king's last wish. Before he died, he gave each of his greatcoats one final command, and this is their journey of trying to fulfill that and what that means for their kingdom, their king, their future. It's great. It's funny. It's a bit grim in places, but it's a good time. I love Sebastian de Castell's writing style. We know that about me though, so I will shut up. But yeah, 4 stars for this one. It's the first in a series. It's quite little. There's a few things that aren't perfect about this. The second book, possibly my favourite book ever, so we'll see how that holds up next month. But yeah, that one. And there is everything that I read in January. This is going to be awkward for me to hold up because I've just been piling them up in my laps like this. I'm really pleased with myself for how much I managed to read in January. All of this, and I'm still behind on my Goodreads goal though, so I need to step it up. But I've had a very pleasurable reading month in January. I've enjoyed what I've been reading. I feel like I'm having a good time. The introduction of a reading journal is also a good time so far, and maybe that's why I've been inspired to film the wrap-up, because I've actually got like documented thoughts and little reviews and stuff in the journal. Maybe that's why. Maybe I will keep up with this, I don't know. But yeah, if you've read any of the books that I have read this month and you want to let me know what you thought of them, feel free to do so down below. One big question for you. How do you feel about monthly wrap-ups as videos? Do you like them? Or do you feel like what you get in vlogs is enough? Let me know, because your opinion obviously matters to me on whether I would like to continue doing them or not. I've been inspired to film this one, but your opinion matters on whether you want to see them in future, so let me know. But yeah, I'm going to wrap it up here. It's been kind of a rapid one, but thank you ever so much for watching and hanging out with me for a little bit. I hope your January reading was fantastic. Let me know what your favourite book of the month was down below. And I shall see you in whatever comes next. Bye!